right, hello everybody, welcome back. I have been promising for a while that I will make a video of how I grid my fabric. I've had a few people ask about that. So you can buy pre-gridded fabric. I just have a whole bunch that wasn't gridded. I bought an entire bolt, so I want to use it up. But also I do like my own gridding because I use Sulky Monofilament thread. It's like a very thin, like a ribbon almost, and you can't pierce it with your needle. So you can slide it right out when you're done. And I like how you can still see the grid lines on areas that you have already stitched because it gives you more landmarks to count from. So that's one benefit of it. Of course, you can always just buy pre-gridded fabric and just skip this step altogether. So, but I'm going to show you how I do it. So, a few things you need. I've written down how many stitches are in my pattern so that I know how far from the center each grid line is supposed to be. Some pins for counting, a needle obviously so that I can do the gridding. I have just some spare regular sewing thread that I will just use for temporarily marking, and I will pull it out before I actually do any stitching so that I won't accidentally pierce it. And then I also just like to use some old scroll rods to help roll my fabric up and sort of help me wrangle it as I'm doing my grid lines. So first thing you want to do is find the center of your fabric. And as you can see, I just, I've already prepared this where I did a quick zigzag stitch with my sewing machine so that the ends won't fray. So to find the center, I'm just going to fold this and mark the folded corner. It's probably going to be pretty close to the crease that's already on there. Yeah, so, and then I'm just going to stick a pin in it so that I can find it again when I reopen my cloth. Just make sure that that's not going through more than one layer here. Okay, so there is my center, and then I'm just going to take that sewing thread that I had earlier, and I'm just going to mark the center with a scrap piece of thread. So, and I will be taking this out later. Goodness. Just giving myself a landmark to work from. All right, so. There we go. So I'm just going to take that pin out. This is a little bit awkward, but oh my goodness. Okay. Don't use the sewing method very often, so you can see I'm having a little issue there. So there, and I will just cut this off later when I'm done with my gridding. Just gonna, yeah. Doesn't have to be right snug up, just so that I can see where I'm working. So I have here, my pattern is going to be 742 stitches by 480 stitches total. So this is the long way, the 742. So, which means I did a little math, divided those in half, so my center stitch is at 371 by 240. So that way I know where my grid lines are going to be. So this is 371, so 370, the one grid line is right about there, one stitch over. So then I have to count how many pins I need. So that's 380, 390, 400, okay, 420, 40. Okay, so then we're going to do lots of counting. So from the center, you're going to count 10 over for each of these squares for each pin. I'm going to just move this a little bit. Oh dear, what a mess. My gosh, that wasn't very smart, was it? Okay. All right. I will be recounting after I place those pins in to make sure that I got the correct number anyway. So if I dropped a couple on the floor. We will catch that later. So, yeah, I like to stitch very, very big projects. And one way this gridding helps is to make sure that I've got everything on that centered properly, so you don't stitch across your project and suddenly find, uh-oh, I ran out of space. You don't want that, right? No, actually, folding that is going to be a problem. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to hold this a little bit like this so I can still count while I do this one direction. So here's my center stitch, and the center stitch is, I know, again at 371, 372, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And then we're going to do this the entire length. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. So this is a bit tedious, but in the end it saves me time. So I'll often just do this while I have a movie on or something. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, so now that I've counted all those, I'm going to double count, double check that it's correct. So again, I was at 371. So this will be at 380, right? So 38, 39, 40, 41, 42, 43, 44, 45, 46, 47, 48, 49, 50, 54, 55, 56, 57, 58, 59, 60, 61, 62, 63, 64, 65, 66. 70, 71, 72, 73. So that's 740 plus 2, which I won't bother gridding. So now that I have found that edge and I've double checked it, I'm going to mark it temporarily with a sewing thread to help me know where to stop my grid lines later. And make this fairly long because I'm going to sort of stretch it down to the corner so that I can find exactly where my corners meet, as that will be important later. So just going to go in line with this one here. So I have a fair amount of extra left, but I found when I calculated it wasn't enough to do another project if I sort of shifted it up and left some extra. So I'm just going to leave this here and cut that off and discard it later. I hate worrying that I'm going to be short of fabric later during the finishing. So I'm just going to carry on down here, just marking this edge. And this will come out later. I will replace it with a monofilament thread later. This is just my guideline. Going to carry this along, because then when I do the grid line going the other way, I know exactly where that corner is. I know exactly where to start my grid, because I don't grid sort of running a stitch through the fabric before anywhere I'm going to stitch, so I really need to know exactly where the dimensions are to do this properly. So about long enough. I'll extend it if I have to. So now I have done the one edge. So now I'm going to pull all these pins. And then we're going to count pins to go the other way. And remember, we always also need a line 0 I've often forgotten that and then been 10 stitches short, because you don't start on the 10 stitch, you start on the 0, right? So I will just carefully move this. Yeah, this is a really large piece. It doesn't even fit on my table. Okay, and again, double checking that center is at 371. So that's going to be 37, 36, 34, 32, and down to 0. And then we're going to double check and count again after we've got these pins in. So again, this was at 371, so there's 370. And then count down to 360 and all the way down to 0. Okay, and then again, I'm going to recount to make sure that I have this exactly right. And I'm actually going to count from this one side. So we need to go up to 370. So that's 0, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 210, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 310, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70. So now I know I have that correct. Now I will mark the other edge with a temporary thread. Okay. Yeah, it looks like quite a lot here, but then after you have to remember you need, a few inches of seam allowance, and then I'd be left, need seam allowance on the leftover piece, and I just discovered it was not going to be big enough for me to want to do anything with it, so I am not going to cut this down that much until I'm actually framing it or mounting it. Okay, it's the same thing. I'm just marking along this edge here towards the corner. And I will be taking this thread out later when I get to it in my gridding process. I will remove it. Good enough. All right, so remove these pins and then do the same thing in the other directions. All right. Okay, so now I know where that corner of those two lines intersecting is. It's right here. And that's going to help me when I start my grid line. So again, we're going to do the same thing, other dimension, so that I will have all my outer dimensions properly marked. Okay. Is that all of them? Okay. So again, we're at 240, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 300, 10, 20, 410, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80. Okay, so one more thread marking that outer border. So the first corner that I start from is the most important, as I'm going to be counting. So, all right, so now we have our outer dimensions are marked. We can start with the actual gridding. So to do that, I like to use my old scroll rods to just sort of help me keep things wrangled together a little bit. Because this is quite a large piece of fabric and it can be kind of unwieldy to do it. So obviously it's too long for it to fit along the entire scroll for this length. So one end's going to be left open. It's not perfect, but it does help keep things a little better under control. Come on. This thing does not want to cooperate. Oh my gosh. Come on, you. There we go. There we go. Okay. Just tighten these up. To give it just a little tension makes it a little easier to stitch the grid line. All right. So now you see why it was so important to find that corner to make sure that I'm going to have my dimensions correct. So now we are going to use this thread. I'll put a link to it in the description box so you can buy it. It's Sulky Sliver, not silver, okay? There are several types of monofilament thread. That is the one that you want, the one that you cannot pierce with the needle. So make sure that your piece is long enough to go across the fabric. And then I do not like to start my thread right here in the corner. I found it distorted the holes, so I tie it to the outside edges and leave a little slack so that it does not pull. And then, of course, you are going to remove it later when you're done. So, just attaching it here to this end. I just double knot it. And then that's not going to go anywhere. With this thread, you don't want to let it sort of fold in on itself as you are stitching with it. It will kind of knot up and make tangles on you, which is not fun. So now I have this exact corner marked. I'm going to be able to pull this thread out as I stitch along here. So I go down, I only go underneath one stitch and then count across. So I'm going to pull this slightly, but I'm going to leave a little bit of slack because that way I won't distort any of my holes in my fabric. And then I'm going to count across. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So that makes each one 10. So I go down for 1, up for 9 equals 10. Make sure that this is not tying itself into a knot. And this temporary line, we can just remove it now. And do the same thing across. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And back up again. And I like to just, as I'm pulling the thread through, just kind of guide it carefully, so like this, so that it will not twist around itself and make a knot, because the knots are almost impossible to remove from this stuff, and then you will have to cut it out and restart. I found that out the hard way. So, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So do the same thing to get all the way across, tie it to the other end, and just carry on like that. Do all your grid, I do all my grid lines one way, then I take them off the scroll bars, and I will use this line as a guide and do all my lines the other way. Then the whole piece is completely gridded. It is a bit tedious. I often will do this sort of at night when I'm too tired to be really counting and doing stitching. I just do this in front of the TV. So sort of do like 1 or 2 grid lines a night. And then by the time I'm finished the main piece I'm working on, my next piece is all gridded and ready to go, and I don't have to wait to finish gridding it before I can start. I almost forgot, I have an already finished piece that I have gridded here. I will bring it and show it to you. So here is a smaller project that I have finished the gridding. So you can see there's a little slack on the edges so that it doesn't pull and distort the holes, and all the grid lines are there, ready to go. All right, so that's what it looks like when it is done. This is a smaller piece, obviously, but there you go. All right, so thank you so much for watching. I hope that you found that helpful. And if you have any other questions, please feel free to just leave me a comment and I'll do my best to answer them. All right, thanks everybody. Goodbye.